Reading Cahiers du Cinema, the 1950s, Neo-Realism, Hollywood, New Wave, edited by Jim Hillier and David Wilson. Part 12, Eric Rohmer, quote, Ajax or the Cid, question mark, end quote. Quote, Ajax ou le Cid, question mark, end quote, Cahiers du Cinema, 59, May 1956. It is to be deplored that the French distributors should have thought fit to wrap up the latest Nicholas Ray film in this nonsense, this grammatically monstrous hodgepodge. I wouldn't call it an expression. By way of a title, La Fureur de Vivre, The Rage to Live. It is ugly, it is vulgar, and what is more, it means absolutely nothing. And yet the American title is restrained and apposite. If it does not yield up the key to the work, it nonetheless aptly illuminates the author's purpose, rebel without a cause, the cause for which one fights. Cahiers readers know that we deem Nicholas Ray to be one of the greatest. Rivette would say the greatest, and I would willingly endorse that, of the new generation of American filmmakers, the generation which only came on the scene after the war. In spite of his obvious lack of pretensions, he is one of the few to possess his own style, his own vision of the world, his own poetry. He is an auteur, a great auteur. A discernible constant factor running all the way through someone's work is a double-edged weapon. It is proof of personality, but also, in some cases, of meagerness. Yet the constraints exercised by the production companies on filmmakers are such, the manpower, the managers, and the good foremen so numerous, that the presence of a leitmotiv is a priori, an auspicious sign. The diversity of themes handled by Nicholas Ray and the richness of the variations which he adds to the beauty of the 3 or 4 great themes dearest to him tend to make his originality somewhat less easy to pinpoint than that of any of his rivals. It is impossible to attach any convenient label to his position, as one can with John Huston. It isn't problems that interest him, in the manner of a Brooks, but human beings. There is not a trace of the psychological subtleties so dear to Mankiewicz, none of those instantly dazzling flashes of lyricism as in Aldrich. His tempo is slow, his melody usually monochord, but its delineation is so precise, its progress so compulsive, that we cannot allow our attention to stray for a moment. The bravura set pieces, brilliant as they are, only assume prominence after a slow crescendo. It is more an art of, quote, connections, end quote, than of, quote, brilliances, end quote. The spirit of this film is similar to that of the earlier ones, but the situations themselves offer very specific analogies. The youth of the heroes, their stubborn intensity, is that of the characters in Knock on Any Door and They Live by Night. We have already encountered the theme of violence in On Dangerous Ground and In a Lonely Place. James Dean's futile heroism in Mitchum's in The Lusty Men, or Cagney's in Run for Cover. The character personified by Natalie Wood is not so dissimilar to the Joan Crawford character in Johnny Guitar. Despite the age difference, I'll go even further. Without exception, all the heroines in his films, Kathy O'Donnell, Gloria Graham, Susan Hayward, Ida Lupino, Vivica Linfors, and the 2 already mentioned under his direction take on a rather surprising air of physical resemblance. Just as he is the poet of violence, Nicholas Ray is perhaps the only poet of love. It is the fascination peculiar to both feelings that obsesses him, more than the study of their origins and their close or distant repercussions. Neither fury nor cruelty, but the special intoxication into which we are plunged by a violent physical act, situation, or passion. Not desire, like the majority of his compatriots in the cinema, but the mysterious affinity that locks 2 human beings together. To all this I would add a feeling for nature, discernible in the background, in both the literal and the figurative sense, that is in harmony with his temperament as more of a colorist, even in his black and white films, than a plastic artist. And then no other director knows how to give his characters so clearly the air of having a common genealogy. They are marked with the seal of the same fate, the same moral or physical disease that is not quite taint or decay. Look at the women's faces with their soft cheeks, but the eyes ringed with shadows, and the heavy lips, those athletic male silhouettes, the Ryans, the Derricks, the Mitchums, flattened or rather drawn back into themselves. James Dean takes this even further. He is like a chrysalis, badly folded out of its cocoon, turned in on himself, question mark, a solitude that is suffered rather than willed. What is a apertured quest for affection, or a ruptured, could that be ruptured? It's blocked out. A ruptured quest for affection, for love or friendship. I spoke just now of a linear development, but not as one of those fine straight lines which hawks would trace, the wide epic road, the calm progressions, the noble bearing. Here, everything is circular, from the gestures of love to the moment of the stars, from those devouring looks that envelop you in their intensity while they strive to avoid your eyes, to those wandering pursuits, those deaths that come full circle and return the heroes to their original state of innocence. Yes, that's it. What these men children lack is the kind of virginity with which the adventure writer usually endows his characters. They do not have the resigned complacency nor the will to self abasement that belongs to the man of the modern novel, nor are they entirely guilty. Nicholas Ray is a poet, of that there is no doubt, but it is not only the lyrical character of his latest film I want to emphasize, but its tragic character. First, through its form, which may appear superficial, but is not unimportant. Rebel Without a Cause is a genuine drama in 5 acts. Act 1, exposition. The two youths and a young girl have just been picked up by the police. The parents intervene. The subject is immediately placed on the moral plane where it is to remain throughout the film. Why the rebellion? Question mark. It does not even have that depth proper to the intentionally absurd, nor is it just the sudden leap of a restive young animal. It is the honor of these boys and girls which is at stake, an honor ill conceived by which cannot be otherwise because its milieu and its circumstances leave it no more notable or no more noble to reign. Certainly, an excess of naive psychoanalysis weighs down the argument, but I don't think it has to be seen as an explanation or an excuse. It is part of the setting of American life. At any rate, that is my opinion. Having seen the film, the confusion did irritate me momentarily, as did a certain insolence, apathy, I'd even say stupidity in the characters. That is how they are, a dramatic necessity. Let us pursue it no further and turn to Act 2. Our main hero, personified by James Dean, has promised to behave and goes back to school. His classmates make fun of his pretensions to, quote, toughness, end quote. The first lyrical interlude with the lesson in the planetarium. That apocalyptic evocation which barely succeeds in veiling with anxiety or feigned indifference the empty eyes of our high school kids. An idea that is oversimple on paper, but it has strength and depth in its execution, charged as it is with both gravity and derision, like everything that is to follow. As they leave, fresh provocations. Dean tries not to get involved, but his honor is at stake. Not his honor as a small town tough guy, but we feel his honor in every sense, in not giving way. A knife fight, where the harshness and the beauty of the landscape against which it is projected makes us forget that it is only a children's game. There is more. The second hand must be played that very evening in an even more absurd and dangerous exercise. This is Act 3. Don't forget that, so far, the will of the characters has been the principal mechanism of the plot, and so it will be until the end. The hero withdraws momentarily to his tent, namely, the family, to meditate. Then he presents himself for battle, a new set piece, but this time it is at night. A peripetia, which makes the action resurge. The game is driving cars into the sea and jumping out at the last moment. The adversary is killed. Everyone takes to their heels. Act 4. Dean has saved his honor and won the love of the victim's girlfriend, the girl he met in the police station, played by Natalie Wood. He goes home and announces to his parents his intention of giving himself up to the police. They dissuade him. Their cowardice arouses his indignation. The father's weakness doesn't just, quote, explain, end quote, the presence of the honor, quote, complex, end quote, in the son. And his unhealthy notoriety, it justifies it in the moral sense of the word. It calls out for it, demands it. Violence, unpleasant scenes handled with unusual candor. He goes to the police station, but the police won't see him. Meanwhile, his classmates, suspecting betrayal, search for him. His only friend, a little dark-haired kid strangely named, quote, Plato, end quote, Salminio, manages to join him after several incidents. This is the last act. At night, in a deserted house that recalls On Dangerous Ground or Johnny Guitar, the second lyrical interlude when Natalie Wood joins the two boys. A love scene by candlelight in the empty room, torment and peace in the night. Beyond childish cynicism comes the first uneasiness, the first shame, the beauty of kisses and caresses. Before woman, our erstwhile hero becomes the little boy that he could not be with his parents, but simultaneously he discovers his responsibility as a man. Ray's eroticism is, if it matters, as uneasy and equivocal as one could wish. There too, the psychoanalyst will have plenty of scope, but he certainly won't be able to appreciate how much we, the audience, feel as we see the high school kids of the afternoon prepare for a physical and moral battle worthy of the name. And we move. not just with events which come thick and fast, the arrival of the other kids, the fight with Minio, who gets scared and shoots, the police of the scene, the police on the scene, the chase in the corpse, or yeah, in the cops, nor with the theatrical grandeur, in the right sense of the term, of the mise en scène, the cars with their brilliant headlights encircling the planetarium, the police demands, the dialogue in the shadows with Dean trying to make his friend see reason, nor with the tragedy of the conclusion, when a policeman shoots, quote, Plato, end quote, as he appears at the top of the steps, nervously gripping the revolver that Dean had unloaded without his knowledge. We make an absolute move forward. We have eliminated that distance which we had so cautiously kept between the characters and ourselves. Their reasons are our reasons, their honor our honor, their madness ours. They have, to use a modern turn of phrase, emerged from inauthenticity. By merit, they have acquired the dignity of tragic heroes, which we could not quite discern in them at first. May I be forgiven my favorite vice of evoking the memory of the ancient Greeks. I don't think, in all good faith, that in this case such a parallel would be artificial. The idea of fate is deep rooted in the works of every period and every nation. It alone is not enough for the foundation of tragedy. It needs the support of some great distinction between the forces at every moment, in man and around him, between the individual's own pride and the society or nature that cannot allow it and victimizes it, punishes it. A tragic hero is always, in some sense, a warrior awoken from the intoxication of battle, suddenly perceiving that he is a God no longer. Anyone who rereads Greek tragedy for enjoyment with school days over will be struck by the presence of a theme, which the commentators have hardly touched on, and which unhappily has never inspired our classics, the theme of violence. That is how hubris and orgia should be understood. A violence that is dangerous, to be condemned, but exhilarating and beautiful. The modern image of fate is no banal, stupid accident, like the one James Dean, the actor, died in at the height of his career. It is not the absurdity of chance, but of our condition or our will. It is the disproportion that exists between the measure of man, always a noble one, and the futility of the task that he often sets himself. It is not that earlier ages have been wiser than others, or given more of themselves in the battle. They too, without a cause, but more rigidly defined codes of honor, always offered some pretext for the most absurd conduct. What I like about this film is that the word, quote, honor, end quote, out of the mouths of these apathetic petite bourgeois juveniles is unchanged and loses none of its pure, dazzling brilliance kept ablaze by these kids, these rodeo specialists, these outlaws of the prairie, even though their vanity and their foolish obstinacy are condemned by society, by morality, by whatever it is, in short, by fate. They are not quite guilty, but not completely innocent either, only blighted by the defect of their century. It is the task of the politicians and the philosophers to show mankind horizons which are clearer than the ones it has chosen. But it is the poet's mission to doubt that optimism, to extract from the lees of his time the precious stone, to teach us to love without forbidding us to judge, to keep always alive in us the sense of tragedy. These thoughts came to me one day in a local cinema where they were showing In a Lonely Place. Each time I see a new Nicholas Ray film, they come to mind again, and particularly with this one, his masterpiece, translated by Liz Haran. And I was reading Part 12, Eric Rohmer, quote, Ajax or the Cid, question mark, end quote. Ajax ou le Cid, question mark, Cahiers du Cinema 59, May 1956. In Cahiers du Cinema, the 1950s Neo-Realism Hollywood New Wave, edited by Jim Hillier and David Wilson.